Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Social Europe video cast. My name is Robin Wilson. I'm the editor of Social Europe. And with me today, I have Anna Pacześniak, who is the professor of politics at the University of Wrocław in Poland. And Anna is also associated with the Foundation for European Progressive Studies, and the foundation, as well as the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, are funding a project which Social Europe is running on the challenges facing social democracy in this decade. And that's the theme for our conversation. Welcome, Anna. It's nice to see you.
Thank you very much for your invitation.
If I could start, Anna, by saying to you that one of the difficult challenges facing social democracy across Europe in recent times has been posed by populist parties which lack commitment to universal norms such as to the rule of law. So how do you think, Anna, social democrats and other progressives across Europe can help their friends in Poland who want to see the rule of law upheld in the country?
I have to say that first question and immediately so difficult. Because external support is always welcome. Democrats should help each other and stand in solidarity when populists undermine the rule of law. The left in Poland feels that it is not alone with this problem of populism, neither at the level of the European Parliament nor at the level of civil organizations in Europe, which have taken action against the strict abortion law, hate speech against the LGBT plus community, in defense of migrants' rights at the Polish-Belarusian border, freedom of the media, independent courts. Because when Jarosław Kaczyński and his party Law and Justice took power in 2015, they made several moves to change the institutional and system without changing the constitution. In response, the Polish society started to protest. I think that media in Europe showed this protest really well. And street demonstrations were focused not only on issues that see high politics interfere with our daily existence, as in the case of the abortion law, but also on issues that were not linked to people's direct experience, such as the independence of courts. However, illiberal politicians in Poland were forced to slow down a little bit their plans, not by pressure from the Polish citizens, but from the European Union, followed by financial threats and the freezing of European funds. So there is certainly an expectation of the Polish left that the European Union institutions will not make a rotten compromise with the Polish government, for example, over the payment of money from the recovery fund. This is, I think, the task of Social Democratic Commissioner and member of European Parliament to see to the rules. Anyway, the matter does not end with the recovery fund. After all, this mechanism, which make possible to stop payment to member states that do not respect the rule of law, applies to whole European Union budget. So Europe cannot afford to have populists playing on its nose and consolidating their power with European collective money. But being uncompromising when it comes to respect the universal norms is one thing. But European progressives and social democrats should start discussing how to help civil society in member states like Poland or Hungary. After all, one of the ways the populists in power are strangling civil society is by cutting of public funding. In case like Poland, it is possible to find a way to channel some of the funds to citizens, to organization without going through the government. Let's start thinking about it and discussing the benefits and risk of such a solution. So I think that is perhaps it's a task for social democrats and progressives in Europe.
Okay, and so you're saying effectively that when the European Union says that Poland must meet certain, quote, milestones and targets, unquote, for the monies which are due under the recovery plan to be dispersed, you're saying that you want to see the European Union institutions be very tough and rigorous about those milestones and targets, and not to make compromises which should not be made.
Yes, I think that, for example, Franz Timmermans, so social democrat, he shows that he is not agree to, as I said, rotten compromise, and I think that we have, as progressists, follow this way.
Yes, there clearly were divisions in the European Commission over the response to Poland, with he being one, Timmermans being one of those who were dissenting. Let me move on, Anna, to how the Peace, the Law and Justice Party has managed to sustain support. And one of the ways it's done so is through its socio-economic policies. You've said, for instance, that civil society organizations in Poland have life that's been made very difficult for them. But some civil society organizations, those that are seen as friendly to the government on abortion or family policy and so on, have received lots of support. But more generally, there have been welfare policies adopted by the PiS in government, which have promoted the idea of the family and childbearing, and of course the idea of a conventional role for women as wives and mothers. The party has labelled people who've been opposed to this as liberals or indeed communists who are still there somewhere in the system. Now, I know you've said that one of the problems that faces the Polish left is the way that the political spectrum in Poland has been defined as the populists versus only the liberals, and the left has been rather squeezed out. So how do you think the left can best respond in Poland to this situation where the populists in power have manipulated their control over the budget to try and win support from people who might otherwise support the left?
Mm-hmm. So the answer seems simple, although its implementation is not. Thanks to the progressive, to the left, Poles should understand that the price that the populists in power have put on their socio-economic policies is extremely high. They have to understand, thanks of the left, that people do not have to pay for granting family-linked welfare benefits by the end of the rule of law or human rights or civic freedoms. So leftist parties must convince people that there are the political force which will guarantee both the welfare state and rule of law. Definitely, the progressive will be more credible in this discourse than the liberals in Poland. Although all political parties in Poland have understood that to secure popular support, despite the difficult economic situation due to the Russian invasion in Ukraine, for instance, it's not only the case of the Russian invasion, they have to promise something concrete and not to leave the impression that only the law and justice is the friend of ordinary people. Left-wing rhetoric has already begun to be used even by liberal leader of Civic Platform in Poland, Donald Tusk, who has announced that he will introduce a pilot 4-day working week if he wins next election. You also touch in your question on the problem of labeling of the left as communist. It is a refrain that recurs less and less frequently because it refers to the old division of the Polish political landscape into post-communist party and anti-communist party in 1990s. Now, with the exception of some of the oldest age groups of voters, such label hits a void. People are not longer afraid of communists. But in Poland, they are not waiting and looking out for communists either. That is clear. And I think that it's also perhaps we can return to this issue. But it's true that the objective situation of Polish left is not easy. It is not just a question of party organization, leadership, program. Of course, it's not a question of seeking external excuse for the party's problem, but rather explain them. Since the 2005 parliamentary election, a fundamental transformation has occurred in the structure of context of Polish political landscape. The left-wing versus right-wing opposition axis, alongside which political and electoral competition had so far been organized, has been relegated to the background. What has become significant and, as we already know, permanent is another dimension that of the opposition between of solidary Poland and a liberal one. And the problem of leftist party is that they are in between. Because this division is managed by two parties, the nationalist populist right party Law and Justice and the liberal center-right party Civic Platform. And this for the left is an extremely difficult situation because on a socio-economic level, it is closer to a vision of solidary Poland, but axiologically to a liberal one. So the problem is that in the mind and emotions of many voters, such an option does not exist.
One of the things that's been characteristic of social democratic parties elsewhere in Europe in recent years, Anna, has been the increasing embrace of gender equality, not adequate, of course, from a feminist point of view, but increasingly high on the agenda, associated with women taking increasingly prominent positions in social democratic parties and trade unions and so on. In Poland, however, as in Croatia and in some other countries in Central and Eastern Europe, there has been a backlash in recent years, and the phraseology, gender ideology, has been used by those who would try to oppose feminism and any kind of progressive ideas around gender. How do you think, Anna, that people on the left and feminists can best respond to this attack on so-called gender ideology?
Indeed, in Poland, progressives, feminists have to fight for base issues such as an access to sexuality education, safe abortion, respect for minorities. These are issues that have long been settled in European countries, although the example of the United States shows that even in consolidated democracies, reproductive health issues can set the public debate on fire. So in Poland is also the case from the beginning of democratic transition. Poland now has one of the most restrictive law on abortion, which is in practice impossible to perform legally in the country. This is a consequence of a new interpretation of Polish constitution by the Constitutional Tribunal, captured by ruling party, so by Law and Justice. This new interpretation of Polish law was the reason of huge street protests in the autumn of 2020. The anger and rage, not only of women, then translated into political polls in which the conservative from Law and Justice were visibly losing support. The problem is that there have been no elections in Poland since then, since this street protest. So those emotions have so far not removed them from the power. The Polish left failed, I think, to make political capital out of this street protest. For me, a clear example of the gap between social change and support for political parties in Poland are the example of young voters. Although now a third of them declare to be left-wing, only 1 in 10 wants to vote for the leftist party. So changes in Polish society, such as increasing secularization and liberalization, are not reflected in who is in power. So voting behavior research shows that the priority of progressive parties has to be to mobilize the progressive electorate to convince them to take part in elections and vote. Because this electorate is really numerous in Poland, but it is discouraged and passive. So previous elections in Poland have shown that the right-wing parties was better at voter mobilization. So now it is time to change that. And we can expect that the gender ideology, of course, it's not true definition, but to come under attack again before the next election. Already now, the leader of Law and Justice Party, Jarosław Kaczyński, is mocking transgender people as if he plans to redirect the election campaign on axiological issues. With stagflation predicted and the economic concerns of average citizens in Poland, who may no longer believe that the current government will get them through difficult times, such the diversion of people's attention is to the advantage of the ruling National Conservatives. What we may yet witness before the election is pressure from the ultra-Catholic circles on the ruling right-wing parties seeking re-election in 2023. This was the case in the 2019 general election in Poland, when this milieu used the election campaign period to force those in power to introduce a law criminalizing sexuality education, shown by this circle, radical circle, as a tool for pedophilia, and the demoralization of children. This is a good indication, I think, of the ideological tension in contemporary Poland.
You've said, and it seems this way from the outside, Anna, that you think the Constitutional Tribunal went too far with its ruling in terms of public opinion in Poland, and even beyond feminist circles, many people find the ruling very extreme. I know, for example, that my Polish vegetable supplier in Belfast found it too extreme. She's on the centre-right. Is that also true, do you think, of the attack on LGBT plus rights? We've seen, for example, some local authorities in Poland describe themselves as LGBT-free zones. Is there perhaps some hope that maybe those on the extreme right are going too far in that regard as well, or do they get a ready audience for that homophobic rhetoric? What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yes, because it's strange to say this, because of course LGBT people are not ideology, as a president of Poland, Andrzej Duda, said during his campaign in 2020. So saying that it's perhaps it's a rhetoric of Law and Justice Party will go too far, and it's finally it's good news for progressives is a little bit odd. But I think that it in some way it's true. We have to understand that social democrats in Poland are not the main opponent for the national conservatives. As I said, this is due that the division is not between right and left. It's the division between solidary Poland and liberal one. So the left even has the difficult 4-year experience of being an extra-parliamentary party between 2015 and 2019. And in 19, it is the only political formation in Poland so far to return to parliament. It was possible by the building of the left, a big left-wing coalition between post-communist social democrats from Democratic Left Alliance, progressives from the new party Spring, so Wiosna in Polish, and the Socialist Party together, so Razem. It was also the feminist organization there. I think that the building a big coalition, it is a good idea for the election. Now the left faces another electoral dilemma. Because the leader of the largest opposition party, Civic Platform, Donald Tusk, is pushing the idea that the democratic opposition should go to the next parliamentary election together, as in Hungary, but of course context was different. The argument is that with a proportional electoral law, with the don't formula, as in Poland, only such a strategy has a chance to removing Law and Justice from power. So we do not yet know what the left's decision will be. As a political scientist, I think that it is worth to think into this direction, because politicians cannot abstract from institutional condition and the context. If they want to improve this context, they must first remove from power the people who spoiled the institution, democratic institution. So I think that perhaps this aim have to push democratic opposition to go together.
Many thanks, Anna, for such an illuminating conversation about the challenges facing the Polish left, which are, as you've indicated, very substantial, and you've offered some potential solutions to those challenges. I'm very grateful to you for that. You've been listening to Anna Pacześniak, Professor of Politics at the University of Wrocław. And many thanks for listening. Many thanks to you, Anna, and goodbye.